Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives. Today, I have the pleasure of having as my guest, Deidre Sirianni. Welcome, Deidre.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, David. I'm excited to be here.
Now, Deidre, there's many different directions this conversations could go on, but one of the things that you said is, I'll sort of misinterpret this, but you really help people become as much as they can be, how they can be more of themselves. And
Mhm.
and I'm curious as first of all what that means.
Yeah. Well, I think the first part when we really look at helping people become who they're meant to be is really removing all of the things in their life and their past experiences, like dissolving negative experiences that shape our programming and cause us to be inauthentic to the truest version of who we are. When we remove everything that, is causing a flower not to grow and we put it into the right environment and get rid of the weeds and whatever is killing the flower, then the flower can bloom. So the first part about, waking up to who we are and our full potential is understanding, the deeper core programming that may keep us in a space of pain or illusion and keep us in these cycles of not really stepping into who we are meant to be. And that to me is a space of freedom, full expression, and living it from a place of joy most of the time. Not all the time, because we're humans. We're going to have a bunch of stuff that happens. But I do believe that we are meant to be in a space of joy or even neutrality, peace most of the time. And I think that's a good measurement of you are in a space of alignment and your true identity if you are in a space of peace and also self expression and joy most of the time.
So I would have loved to have had you on a conversation I had this morning with some colleagues where we have, in an association I'm part of, we have these different communities, areas of interest. And the one today was on this community is on Stoicism and Stoic philosophy and things like that. And part of our conversation was about, to recognize what your calling is. Right. But what I'm hearing is that, well, before you can even talk about that, there's so much stuff that gets in the way from even having that conversation. Is that fair?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Hmm.
So how do you do that, Deidre? How do you get people to start recognize it? Recognize it as one thing, then letting go of it is probably a different process.
Oh, for sure. I feel like so in my book, Turn Your Light On, I talk about the four stages of waking up to who we are and who we're meant to be. And if I can, I'd love to share those four stages because within the four stages, we can usually self identify what stage we're at, but it's also a scale that can shift. You can go from stage 4 to stage one to stage 3, depending on how well supported you are and also how like what's going on in your external reality. So stage 1
Oh,
of
And
turning
and
your
by the
light
way,
on.
for
What?
those that are listening, I'll make sure that we have, the information about your book and where to find it. So please, as you're driving, don't feel you have to stop and write this down. We'll make that accessible for you. So 4 stages. Sorry, here we go.
Yeah, thanks, David. So the first stage of turning your light on, it's we all have a light inside of us. And when I think of light, I think of clarity. I think of knowing who we are and really sharing our truest essence of self with everything and everyone around us. So at stage 1, our light is off. Okay. And we all have a light. Were born into this world with our light. But then there have been certain experiences or patterns that we've learned to keep us safe. And it's kind of like being in the forest in the middle of the night with a flashlight that doesn't work. So if you were in the forest in the middle of the night by yourself, David, and your flashlight didn't work, and there's all these noises in the bush and there's no one around, what would you most likely do?
I'd want to hide. I'd want to stay safe. I'd probably be really anxious and really nervous and not necessarily know what I don't want, but don't necessarily know what I want to do next.
Yeah. So this is exactly how it shows up for us when we are in a space of survival. We may not be even aware that we're in a stage of survival. So at stage one of turning our light on, it's very much what you said. We're living in fear. So we're not doing things because we don't think that we can have what we want. We're afraid of making mistakes or failing. And essentially, we're really disconnected from ourself and the world around us because we're in this fight or flight or fawn response. And so, what it looks like if I was in the forest in the middle of the night, I'd have my back against a tree. I'd probably just be like, on edge the whole time. And there's no way I'd be going anywhere.
Mhm.
So, how this translates into the human experience is we feel stuck. We feel disconnected from ourselves. We feel disconnected from the world around us. We live in fear. And typically we don't really change much because we don't feel like it's available for us. And at stage 1 of turning our light on, the first really important piece here is to start to look at the body, because the body is always giving us clues of how we are out of alignment and not honoring our soul. So long time ago, this is like, I don't know, maybe like 10, actually probably like 14 years ago, I met my very first shaman. And I remember I was a yoga teacher at the time, and a friend of mine invited me to a workshop. And she's like, "Yeah, like go to this workshop with me." So I met her at some like random warehouse in North Vancouver. I had my yoga mat. I thought we were doing a yoga workshop. And I walk in and I look in this warehouse, and there's a big circle of people with chairs. There's a woman with long hair that goes down to the ground, long white hair. And I look around and I assess the situation. I'm like, I don't think this is a yoga workshop. So everyone else is sitting down, and there's one spot available directly in front of this woman. And I'm like, okay, so there's one chair left. I'll go sit there. And then we start. And moment after moment, she goes around the circle and starts to ask everyone, how do you feel in your body? And person after person starts crying or yelling or doing some big gesture. And I'm looking at the exit, that I came in, like the door, and I'm like, how do I get out of here without anyone seeing? Also, I'm like early 20s. I'm like 21 years old. Okay. And I'm looking at the exit. I'm like, how do I get out of here with no one noticing? It's impossible. And she's going around one person by one person and finally gets to me, and she's like, how do you feel in your body? And I'm like, good. A big smile on my face. How do I like not deal with whatever she's trying to do? She's like, try again, try again. And I kept answering. I'm like, I feel my feet on the ground. Like I feel my butt on the seat. Like, what does she want from me? So I'm just saying all these things. And then after two or three answers, she's like, we'll come back to you later. And yeah, so intense, right? And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, I gotta get out of here." So the workshop, whatever I signed up for, finally ended, and I remember rushing to the exit without running. It's called a fast walk. So I'm speed walking, trying to look normal, and then as I'm leaving the warehouse, my soul says, my voice said, but it was my soul, it wasn't me, I had no control over this, David, said, "When is the next circle?" And, I was just as surprised as everyone else, and I left, and, I continued to come back week after week after week for a year, and that was the very first shaman that I studied with, and her whole teaching, David, is around the language of the soul and how dis-ease is a manifestation of being out of alignment, out of integrity with our soul. So, at stage 1 of turning our light on, the first thing we want to really look at is, what am I avoiding? What am I not dealing with? What am I not listening to? And what is my soul trying to tell me through symptoms of depression, disease, disconnection, and everything else? And then oftentimes it's a little nudge of, you're not doing this thing. You want to do this thing. You need to step out of this environment. You need to start doing this. And then we can start to take those steps and start to move from stage 1, which is fight, flight, trauma, all those things, to stage 2.
Okay, so light is off, stage number one. Some sort of some awareness starts to happen that there's some motion to be taken, and that your soul rather than your head is telling you you should come back and you could keep on
Yeah.
this. So it wasn't like an intellectual realization.
No, no. And then at stage 1, so we're at stage 1, the lights off. Stage 2, it's the flickering light. So sometimes the light's on and sometimes it's off. So again, it's kind of like I'll give it back to you, David. Like you're in the forest in the middle of the night. Sometimes your flashlight works and sometimes it doesn't work. What happens when your flashlight works?
Well, start to go as far as I can see from the light that's being shone.
Yeah. And then what happens when suddenly your light stops working? What do you do?
I stop again and start shaking it and hoping I can get it back on again.
Yeah, so at stage 2, it's, sometimes when our light's on, we're showing up, we're moving forward with our life, we're achieving goals, we have clarity, maybe we have momentum, we have confidence in a direction, and then sometimes it's like, "Oh, the light's not working." But when our light turns off, we go back to stage 1. We start to numb out, we start to avoid, we start to go back into fear or comfort zone, and what it sounds like internally in the human experience is, well, how come I'm not showing up consistently? Like sometimes I work out a lot, sometimes I eat right, sometimes my relationships are great, sometimes I'm moving forward with my business. And then what feels like out of nowhere, I get off track and I go back to stage 1. And so at stage 2, we have these subconscious triggers that we might not be aware of that derail us from our goals, that derail us from taking steps forward. And that usually comes from unhealed trauma that's showing up physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically. So as we start to go about our day, go about our life, and we start making strides and progress, we get thrown off track. And then we're like, I don't trust myself. I'm not showing up. I'm being inconsistent. And we can go into coping mechanisms like binge eating, addictions, and so many other things that can show up for us. I know you wanted to say something.
Well, one was a question like, so when the light flickers, so I was going to ask, but you answered the question in advance. Like, so do you stop and wait, or you to go back? And you said go back to stage one, which is basically a stopping stage as well. Then you also talked about trauma, and we hear so much these days about trauma and PTSD and all sorts of stuff like that. And maybe you could just say a little bit about when you say trauma, what you mean, and what kind of a traumas might might uh, might people be able to relate to.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different types of traumas. Like, trauma essentially is any experience that is, I'm putting in quotations, negative, as in it didn't feel good in the moment. Like you didn't want to feel it. And because you didn't want to feel it, you didn't complete it. So anything we haven't fully felt, like a completion of an experience that's in quotations negative, an undesired feeling or emotion, that can be considered a trauma, either a big trauma or a small trauma. It doesn't really matter. It's just a negative experience that you haven't completed. And so when we have a trauma, there's an image, there's a thought, there's a body sensation and emotion that gets frozen in time. And because we're walking around our lives, living our lives, doing whatever we're doing, going after our dreams, in relationships, everything else, if it's incomplete, it's going to continue to show up and derail us when it gets triggered in one of those senses as an image, a body sensation, emotion, etc.
So say a little bit more about what you mean by it's not complete. Is that like it hasn't been moved through, it hasn't been resolved, it hasn't been accepted? What kind of happens there or doesn't happen?
Yeah. Yeah, so with a trauma, it's like something is frozen in time. So if you think about a movie, when we watch a movie, things are moving, everything's good. And then we press the pause button with our remote control. And suddenly that moment is frozen. So because there's no more movement in that moment that we've experienced, our body hasn't released it and is still tensing up. So as we're going about our day in our life, we're like, oh, I want to be visible. I want to go on stages. I want to, whatever the goal is, or I want to be in a great relationship. But then as something similar on one of those levels, an image, a thought, a body sensation, or an emotion that's similar to what hasn't been completed in those frozen moments comes up, we can fight, flight, we can fawn, and we can sabotage. We can eat a box of cookies and watch a bunch of Netflix and be like, I can't deal with that problem. So I'm going to do something to comfort myself. Yeah.
So that's freeze or whatever. And you use the term, and I know a lot of people are familiar with fight, flight. Not as many are familiar with fawn, which is kind of new in the
Yeah.
lexicon the last number of years. So maybe just briefly describe fawn as one of the things we might gravitate to in
Yeah.
stage two.
Yeah, so fawning is essentially just kind of going with the flow of things as a way to protect ourselves. So fighting, or if we're freezing, it's pretty obvious we're freezing. If we're flighting, we're running away from it. We're like, ah, right? And then fawning is like, oh yeah, like you just kind of go with the flow to protect yourself. You could also call it people pleasing. So if you're in a situation where you feel really unsafe, you're like, I am just going to say and do whatever this person wants me to say or do to keep myself safe, which is probably a coping mechanism from childhood of like, if I'm the good girl or the good boy or whatever, I am going to be safe. So it's that showing up in a space of a trauma response, potentially in the moment. But also, if you are experiencing something uncomfortable that is similar to a past experience, you will pretend that maybe you don't have needs or you agree with someone or go in a way that is out of alignment, but it's a way to protect yourself. Just like the freezes, if we freeze, we don't have to feel it. If we flight, we don't have to deal with it. And if we fawn, we're protecting ourselves by people pleasing and going with whatever's going on, even if it's not actually in alignment and true on a conscious level.
Okay, that's very helpful. I mean, I never know who's listening. The 14 or 15 people what their experience is. So I think
Yeah.
that's very helpful. So we've gone from the light is off, the light is flickering, and we're these traumas trigger sort of previous responses to something that's similar. Kind of looks like this.
Mhm.
I better respond the same way. Someone said last time someone said that to me. This is what it was all about. Here's something similar. Must be the same, and react accordingly. So how do we move from the flickering light into whatever stage three is?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So stage two is the flickering light. So that's like when we're in the identity of we feel like we're sabotaging ourselves. We feel like we're opting out of things that we really want, but we don't know why. So it's super frustrating. So how we go from stage two to stage three, which is the bright light stage, is we understand what some of our triggers are and what some of our traumatic experiences are, and we work on completing some of them so that in the future, when potentially triggering experiences happen, instead of fighting, flighting, or fawning, or sabotaging, whatever that looks like, we can actually continue to take steps forward even when it's uncomfortable, right? So, for example, let's say, I'm thinking about, you know, for example, let's say that I want to be visible. I want to be on stages, right? I want to do all these things, but let's say I have this fear or this trauma that last time I was visible, I had a bunch of people make fun of me and hurt me and call me names or whatever the thing is. That's true. That might be a true thing that happened in the past. But it's no longer true now. So if I'm someone who has a fear of putting myself out there, and these old wounds are coming up and it's making me not want to move forward with certain goals or aspirations that I have, I might have to first process some emotions, maybe do some trauma healing work, or have some tools in my tool belt for when I feel those fears come up because they are real, but they're not real in the here and now. That's a past experience. And if we don't let the past stay in the past and we bring it with us, we continue to recycle it and we essentially create the same experience we had in the past because we're taking our garbage and then we're throwing it into our future. So, emotional processing, having self awareness of what they are, and sometimes having a guide, a therapist, a coach, someone who can help us overcome the obstacles as they show up and know that it's like, this is normal to want to opt out because of my past experiences, but instead I'm going to do something different.
And so, so I'm curious. So there's you keep using the phrase completed. So I'm curious about
Mhm.
what completed looks like, and is it completed in this particular circumstance? It's like something I had before, or is it actually completing what happened before? So the next time I see something that's similar, I don't get triggered by it.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So there's micro traumas that can happen within a bigger trauma. So for example, I do trauma releases with people sometimes in our work just so that they can overcome the obstacles. The first time I experienced this work, I thought I had like overcome a trauma that I apparently did not. I was like, I'm so over that. I'm so empowered. And like the empowerment stage is not the healed stage. The healed stage is a space of peace. So when I completed healing a significant trauma in my life, when I looked back on it, I had complete peace in my body and I had an overview or experience of, well, this is what the person was going through. This is what I was going through. I understand my purpose of why I had to go through that and the gifts that came from it. And now I feel complete with it. But I also have discernment. So just because something happened in the past and was traumatic doesn't mean I'm going to have like, oh my gosh, I can't be around this or that. It's more of like, well, from this place, I'm in a space of peace and completion, but also discernment because when we go through trauma, we gain wisdom that we didn't have before. And that also is a gift, right? So you're smarter, you're more relaxed, but definitely a space of peace is a sign that you've completed the trauma. A lot of the time, when you have a very fear based response right away, sometimes it's your intuition being like, get the F out of here, or you need to leave. So, for example, this is so funny that I'm sharing this. I've never shared this story on a podcast, but I was walking by Starbucks in downtown Vancouver, Olympic Village like 5 years ago, and there was a man on a bicycle just coming down the road. Looked like a normal man, like, if you were to see him or I were to see him, you wouldn't be like, "Oh, this guy looks scary." But there was something about his being, like his beingness,
Mhm.
that scared the shit out of me, and I ran into Starbucks, and I was shaking, and I was like, "That guy is a murderer, like, that guy kills people," and I don't even remember what his face looked like, but I just knew my intuition was like, get out of here now. And I remember I talked to someone after, I'm like, I saw a serial killer and I don't know how I know that. I just know that I needed to get away from this person as fast as possible. So in that situation, it was my intuition saying, get out of here. But if it's like you continue to sabotage things in your life, you're not showing up and there's all these patterns, well, you probably have some trauma that you haven't healed or cleared. And that's why you continue to repeat old patterns in your life and you're not moving forward. I know we're going in a lot of different directions, but this is
That's
all
fine.
connected to the trauma.
Yeah, no, and of course now people are going to wonder, did he ever get arrested? Right?
I don't know. All I know is that like I sprinted into Starbucks and I was like out of breath and people were looking at me and I remember like it was a blur, but all I know is like right after I was like that was a serial killer. Like that guy is dangerous. And just looked like a normal person. He wasn't like it's not like he had like a machete or like he didn't look scary, just looked like an average person, but my soul was like this person's dangerous.
Well, I mean, I can just feel the intensity of that, and I'm curious how have you moved through that, and if so, how like in a similar situation again, what might be different for you?
Oh, that situation of running away from him?
Well, or well, so that wasn't necessarily based on something that happened in your past. That was an immediate feeling of there's
That was
something.
just, like, my body protecting me. It was immediate, like, it was, like, telling me to run. You know what I mean? So our intuition is, like, our intuition is usually the very first feeling we have about something, right? So, I share a trauma in the TEDx that I did years ago. I was, raped when I was 19, and before that happened, my body was literally shutting down and telling me not to go inside of someone's home. Like it was literally telling me, but I didn't intellectually understand it and I was bypassing it. So my body was like, no, 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 no. But I was bypassing it. So because I bypassed my intuition because it was inconvenient, right?
Hmm.
I experienced a big trauma. And because of that big trauma, now I have the wisdom of understanding my intuition, but also I understand, what it's like to have gone through a trauma, a significant trauma. And now I've helped a lot of people in the space of trauma because I had that trauma. I understand it, right? So there's like gifts on the other side of our trauma if we have the courage to heal it and to complete it. But also, our intuition is speaking to us a lot. If we learn how to listen, we can prevent ourselves from going through so much stuff.
So well, first of all, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Like I have a young daughter, right? And
Mm.
just the thought of anything like that happening just kind of, I freeze just thinking about that. But when you talk about intuition, how do intuition and discernment connect or overlap? Do they work together? Are they separate?
Um, Intuition for me is usually just like a body sensation that I'll feel. Like I notice when I'm not supposed to be somewhere, my body will get really tired really fast and won't let me go somewhere. So if I go back to that night that I was sharing that trauma,
Hmm.
um, and I break a lot of it down in my TEDx, but I felt like there was like weighted bricks in my legs as I was walking. And it was like, that's my way of my body being like, "No, like, you're not supposed to move forward." And I've had moments in time. I was just talking to my partner about this the other day, like, I remember a couple times where I was supposed to go to a party or a gathering, and I couldn't leave my apartment, like, every part of me was just I was like, "Wow, I'm suddenly so exhausted, I don't know why." And it was all around going like, leaving my apartment, so I'm like, "Okay, my body, my intuition, my angels and guides are like, you shouldn't leave. I could have avoided a car accident. Who knows? But all I know is that I'm protected. So for me, extreme exhaustion when I'm supposed to go somewhere is a sign you're not supposed to go. And then also, like, there are different ways that our body can speak to us. There's like generic, ways that our body speaks to us, but then there's more specific ones with whatever we're going through. But for me, that is like, don't leave. Like, you're not supposed to go. Don't push yourself to go. So, intuition to me is very physical and it's the first response to something. So, for example, if I meet you and I'm like, "Oh, you're great," right? And then maybe like a couple days later, my analytical mind goes off and I'm like judging you and I'm like, I don't know if I can trust this person. I'm just giving a random situation. This is not
Mm.
true. It's probably my fear or my programming taking over. Same with if someone wants to join a program or do something and they're excited and energized at the beginning, but then they talk themselves out of it. It's usually programming and fear that comes next. I hope that answers your question with the intuition piece.
Yeah, well, it does. I mean, so I'm thinking, so in the context of a bright light, there's the intuition. Part of it is paying attention to it,
Yeah,
right? Not discounting it. Then presumably there's some tools or thinking or ways to actually deal with that when it comes up and not just ignore it.
totally. Yeah.
So
And
we're
so, oh, go ahead.
sure, go ahead. After you.
Oh, I was just going to say, and so at stage 3, the bright light stage, your light is on and it's shining in all directions. But the problem is that your light is in all direction. There's no direction to your light. So what tends to happen at stage 3, as far as like the stages of awakening, the stages of waking up to who you are and who you're meant to be, is we're scattered a lot of the time. We're taking on projects, we're people pleasing, we're doing all these things for everyone else's dreams or what everyone else wants, but we're usually putting our own dream, our big project, the thing that we really want on the back burner. So what tends to happen is we have all this energy and we're putting it towards everyone else. and then we're getting exhausted, we're getting resentful, we're looking around at everyone else and we're like, everyone else is living the life that they want, but I'm not. And it's like, well, yeah, you're not trusting yourself and you're not putting your dreams in the forefront of your life. You're putting them on the back burner. So at stage 3, we need to get really good at quieting the noise, getting really clear on what's actually for you, what's not for you, and then stop investing in plan B's, C's, D's, etc., and actually go all in on what it is that we truly want so that we can move to stage 4, which is, the laser focus light. We're on purpose, we're on mission. People know what we're about. Things are moving forward. All the right people are showing up. There's synchronicity, there's flow, there's abundance, there's impact. And that really comes from trusting in a force that's greater than ourselves, that what is coming through for us is for us. And it's not something that we just made up. Because if you have a vision of doing something or having something, it's because it's for you, but you have to choose it and go all in on it. And that's the 4 stages of turning your light on.
So how do I get? Oh, did I say I meant how does one move into laser light? And also, you said earlier that uh, it's not just a single flow, and once you're there, you're there, but you can cycle back through it and change, go
Mhm.
through these different stages. How does that happen, or do you have any examples of that? How the recycling or the jumping from one to another
Yeah.
happens?
So let's say that I'm at stage 4, and this has happened in my life before. I'm at stage 4, everything's great, things are happening, but then there's an external life event that happens. It could be a death of a loved one, it could be something that feels like out of your control, and it causes a really big energy exhaustion, or something just kind of comes up unexpectedly. And because of that unexpected external life event, you don't necessarily resource yourself as much as you could. And what I mean by resource yourself is getting support mentally, emotionally, physically to continue to show up as the leader. And instead you kind of start to like get exhausted. Your tire starts to leak and you start going back into old patterns and you're like, you know what? It's probably easier for me just to like opt out of what I want because I don't have any energy. And I think we've all been there. Like we have something significant happen, right?
So, I mean, I have so many other questions. Maybe I'll just do a couple more. And one of them is this doesn't sound like a theoretical model that you read somewhere, Deidre. It sounds like it's. Can you say a little bit about how you came to this model?
Yeah. So I'll share a story with you. So about actually it's been 9 years now. So 9 years ago, I was standing in my kitchen and I was putting my fingers through my hair as, us ladies with long hair do sometimes. And I noticed that something fell off. So I grabbed my phone, I raced to the bathroom, I put on camera mode, I started like angling it, trying to figure out like what's going on. And that's when I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have a bald spot and it's this big." So it was a couple inches wide. And I thought to myself, like, how do I fix this? How did this happen? Clearly, like the universe, God's trying to, show me something because it's going after my hair. So I go back to my kitchen and I sit down for a moment just to ground. And that's when this voice came out of me and said, if you don't listen to your soul, you're going to manifest cancer and die in the next year.
Whoa.
So yeah, I only heard this voice speak to me one other time in my life, and it was like 5 years prior. I was outside, I had friends and family to both sides of me, and, I was walking down the aisle about to marry the man that I thought I was gonna spend the rest of my life with, and moments before saying I do, this same voice says, "This just isn't going to work." And I never knew what that voice was. It was the first time I'd ever heard it. I didn't know what intuition was. I got married very young. And so I shoved it down and I said, I do. And so now I'm sitting at my kitchen table like 9 years ago. And I'm like, okay, I have 4 autoimmune diseases that the doctors can't seem to help me with. I have chronic pain in my neck and shoulders to the point where my massage therapist actually fired me. Because she's like, "I just can't help you anymore." And, I was so depressed. I had a vision of ending my life. I just was like, something is not right here. And every time I was around my husband, he was always telling me who to be, how to be, what I can say, what I can't say, what I can wear, what I can't wear, and just always putting me down. And so I was sitting there at my kitchen table 9 years ago and remembering all of this, and I'm like, could it be that this entire time, ever since I walked down the aisle and ignored that voice, that my soul has been speaking to me through these symptoms of disease? And I was like, this is exactly what's going on. And I made a vow to myself that I was going to get radically honest with myself, have courage to do the hard things, and take massive inspired action. And within just so many months, 3 months of doing this inner work, I healed myself of three of those four autoimmune diseases.
Wow.
Yeah, my chronic pain was gone in my neck and shoulders, totally gone. Depression, gone. Food sensitivity is gone. And then eventually I had the courage to leave the relationship. And so the phases of turning your light on are a combination of that kind of origin story of I was essentially betraying my soul by being in that relationship and it was making me sick. Paired with, the significant trauma that I mentioned earlier when I was 19. And just a lot of life experiences of seeing the patterns on how everything's connected and how I've lived in all of these different stages and then also working with, hundreds of people with healing in the past and seeing, oh, this person's at stage one. I really do feel like chronic pain and disease is like a sign you're really out of alignment with your soul. And I didn't believe this stuff until I was able to heal my body. And I've seen miraculous healings in front of me when people actually stop ignoring the thing that they're ignoring and they're pretending they're not ignoring. So that changed my life. But the interesting thing that I really want to share here is your stage of your light is not determined based on how popular you are or how other people see you. So a lot of people get this wrong because when I had that, wake up call 9 years ago, if you were to see me be like, "Oh, Deidre's such a bright light. She's so external. She's so out there." Like I was on television, I had a successful business, I was doing all these things. But I was so out of alignment with my soul. So it's only something that someone can really assess about themselves and get honest with. Where am I at? What's the pattern? What's going on? And if you're filled with anxiety and fear and depression and all those things, it's because you're betraying yourself on some level. And your soul, I believe our soul will kill us if we're not listening. And I wouldn't be alive if I didn't honor my soul 9 years ago. Like I was getting sick fast on every level.
It's kind of like your soul sees the mask that the rest of the world is
Yeah,
seeing. Right. And the
exactly.
mask.
Yeah.
So, so how do you work with people, Deidre? And I'll make sure in the program notes, how people can contact you and things like that. But let's say someone says, "Oh, this is really ringing true for me. I think I'm at stage whatever." Like, what's it look
Mhm.
like when you're working with? I'm sure it's all over the map, but is there sort of a generic? Here's how I approach it.
Yeah, so typically right now my main type of work that I love supporting people with, like I have my book Turn Your Light On and I have a course Turn Your Light On that's all about healing, getting out of your own way, going all in on your purpose, but what I'm most passionate about is helping people transform their trauma, their pain, their past into their greatest gift for humanity. And that's
Hmm.
really about helping people find the wisdom in their pain and create conscious businesses of impact through storytelling and speaking on stages and getting on podcasts. Because when we tell our stories, we help people heal and we help people make changes that they know that they need to make on some level and we help people accelerate their own evolution. So for me, I have a program that's called Speak to Impact, and it's all about storytelling. It's big on personal development and transforming pain into purpose, but also how do you make the biggest impact with the work that you're here to do? I love working with people who feel called to really support others. Yeah.
So, what? I like to leave listeners with something that they can think about and reflect on. So, if you had one or two questions that people might consider to help them identify, at least at a starting point, which of those four stages they're in, Where
Mhm.
how might someone start reflecting upon that?
Yeah, so I have a quiz. I can send you the quiz link and people can actually go through a self-assessment and it will tell them what stage they're mainly leaning at towards. So I will send that to you so you can add that in the show notes. So you can take the quiz. It's only like a few minutes and it will give you a video training as well. But I think the biggest thing for me at that point in my life was, where am I not fully being honest with myself? And where am I potentially pretending something's working that's not working? Because I was like the queen of being like, oh, everything's fine. Everything's fine. It's not so bad. I was like, I was almost toxic positivity, never felt negative emotions, which is why going and meeting that shaman for this first time and everyone having like their whole like crying spell, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get out of here. Right. So, at the time. But I really do feel like the first thing is, where are you maybe not being honest with yourself? Where are you tolerating things that, really aren't working for you, but you're pretending they're working? And how is your body speaking to you? And what is the message that that pain, that symptom, that anxiety is trying to say? And if you can get honest with those pieces, you're going to have a light bulb moment and something will shift if you take action. A lot of people know what they need to change, but they won't take action. And I can't help you if you're not willing to take action. But if you're willing to get honest, have courage, and take radical action, your life can change in like 24 hours. Like huge things can happen just
Mm.
from getting honest with yourself.
So hopefully that's triggered some thoughts for folks. And unfortunately, I just had one other thought that's a little bit of a divergence. But how what do you say to people who seem to be afraid of feeling their emotion or expressing it? Because that seems to be a, could be a fairly substantial part of this, where there's the mask up and all those other kinds of things. Like, how does one move through their willingness to first of all feel their emotion, and secondly be willing to do something with it, like to move through some of these stages? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a good question. So, if you don't feel comfortable feeling your emotions, it's probably because of your programming,
Mm.
your mom, your dad, your environment. It wasn't safe to feel. Like I had experiences where I didn't feel safe to feel. I was always told, you're too sensitive. So I was like trying not to be sensitive. And then I turned into like this toxic positivity bypasser, right? Who had to have a bunch of wake up calls. So I don't recommend that. But if you're there, it's okay. I understand. So the first thing is, look at your environment. My ex-husband, great in a lot of ways, but for me, really toxic. I was not allowed to feel anything, but everything's great. So I created an environment where it was unsafe to feel anything. So you need to, if you are in a relationship like that, or environments like that, or people are around you won't, make fun of you for having emotions. That's a sign that you're in a toxic environment and you probably need to get into a supportive environment. And that's probably a good place to start,
Mm.
is going to a counselor and just processing some stuff, because clearly the people around you are shut down, and are not working on themselves and are out of touch with their emotions because they have a similar background to you, or your emotions trigger the emotions they never got to feel. So it's just a toxic cycle. So go see a therapist, get some support, unpack some of it, and then start to plug yourself into the right environments that are supportive. Like as soon as I started to go to therapy, like I don't know, 10 years ago, and I was like, oh, I'm actually not the problem. It's my relationship is really toxic. Then I was like, "Oh, like there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just in a really toxic environment and like I'm shamed for all these things." I'm like, "Oh." And I started plugging myself into the right environments. That's when things started to shift for me. So,
Mm.
get the support that you need, get into the right environments, and if you don't feel comfortable processing your emotions, it's probably because there's a lot of emotions that you've been bypassing for a long time. And getting some professional support will help you clear it. But once you clear it, you feel so much lighter. It's just like it changes your life.
That's fabulous. So, Deidre, I found this so valuable and so interesting. Could probably go for another 3 or 4 hours, but won't. But some really good information about these stages. Being able to see these stages, knowing that there's ways to move through them, and sort of the well. I don't want to use the light at the end of the tunnel and use light in a different way, but when you get to the focus, when you get to that stage 4 laser light, I could just imagine all kinds of things starting to happen, for oneself and everyone else around you, and it ends up being I think a sense of hope and possibility for other people to maybe begin to think that they can get to the same place. So, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been fun.
So David Gouthro here with Deidre Sirianni, and come on back next week. And all I can guarantee is it'll be a different, equally wonderful person and some different perspectives. So thanks very much for listening. Subscribe now, because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.